Good evening. We will now call to order the Chesterfield Township Planning Commission meeting on September 20th, 2022. I will call the roll. Paul Miller is here. Jerry Alexi.
Here.
Rick LaBelle.
Here.
Brian Demink.
Here.
Mark Renault.
Here.
Ralph Jaworski.
Here.
Jim Klinowski.
Here.
Carl Leonard.
Here.
Brian Carr.
Here.
All present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I will make a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Support.
Supported by Mr. Demink, motion by Mr. Miller. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public hearings tonight, we have one, Austin Catholic Athletic Facility, 2022-04. It's a planned unit development application phase, 13.7 acres on the north side of 23 Mile Road, east of North Ave, parcel ID number 15-09-18-378-016. The address is 25925 23 Mile. And there's some rules that go along with the public hearing, and they're on the back of the agenda. You have, anybody that wants to speak has 3 minutes to speak, and you can only talk one time. So with that, I will make a motion to open the public hearing.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Alexi. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there somebody here from Austin Academy that would like to speak?
Good evening, Scott Baker.
Could you turn on the microphone? Just push the button. On the
Buttons.
Yeah,
There we go.
thanks.
All right. Good evening. My name is Scott Baker. I'm an attorney. I'm representing Austin Catholic. I'm here with Jim Baker, who's the athletic director and vice principal. Unfortunately, our architect and our engineer are not present this evening, so we'll do the best to answer any questions you guys may have. But we will rely heavily upon the submissions that we did submit to the commission. So just a brief overview of this project. Austin Catholic purchased the former Lon Screws Elementary School on 23 Mile Road. I'm sure if you're here, you're familiar with where it's located. They purchased it in 2016, and part of their master plan is to build that into the high school that it once was in terms of facilities and offerings for students. So the first phase of this is the athletic complex, which is what's proposed here for this evening. It's a redevelopment of the existing site, an upgrade field turf for both, actually for football, soccer, softball, and baseball. The applicant, Austin Catholic, is proposing to utilize the planned unit development project or planned unit development ordinance of the township. This just provides them with a little more flexibility in terms of this project and potential future expansions of the school. I could go into specifics about the lighting, but I think I'll wait till after I hear the questions and comments, unless there's anything from the commission at this point that they'd like me to address.
Thank you. Stephanie, could you please tell the audience and the residents what we're looking at here? Sure.
Sure. So as Mr. Baker noted, they are proposing to take the elementary school, the backyard of it essentially, and turn it into a sports complex that would include football, soccer, baseball, and softball fields. And the fields would have synthetic turf. And again, this would be for their students to bring it up to, or to fit the needs of high school students. And so there's a couple of things that they've requested that the Planning Commission discuss tonight in terms of waivers that are part of the PUD process. And would you like me to go through those now,
Sure,
Mr. Chair?
please.
Okay. So the first would be to consider a shorter buffer for the recreational activity area. 50 foot is required from the budding lots, but 4 foot is the smallest that's proposed out of all the adjacent areas. They also have asked that the Planning Commission discuss the fence that's been proposed. They would like to use a vinyl with wood grain appearance fence instead of a wood fence. They've also asked for a waiver for their lighting. They are asking for for floodlights, which is not permitted without Planning Commission approval, and the lights that are proposed exceed the maximum height of 25 feet. The light fixtures range from 60 feet to 80 feet tall. And finally, they're also asking for a waiver for the spillover of those lights into abutting properties. At the rear property line, the spillover exceeds the maximum foot candle, but that quickly drops off as it moves into the property line and does not go into the building envelope of the abutting properties. Would you like me to continue all the way through?
go ahead.
Okay. So again, we have a dimensional ask for the setbacks for the softball fields, or for all the athletic fields, since they don't meet that 50-foot buffer requirement, as well as the fencing, and let's see, lighting. Thank you. And yes, thank you. I'm finally to my point in the letter with the trees. So on page 6 and 7 is where the trees are discussed. So at the very bottom there for the internal parking lot landscaping. So the applicant has asked that this be waived since they are not redoing the parking lot now. This is currently an existing condition. The trees that they propose will be between the athletic fields and the building, the school building, instead of in the parking lot. And they have asked to wait to put those in. Excuse me, I've mixed up the internal parking lots and the frontage. So let me start over with the trees.
Okay.
My apologies. So with the internal parking lot trees, they've indicated that they would like to have that waived. And again, they're not redoing the parking lots. Everything that's being done is in the back of the lot. We've asked that they provide the minimum number of trees or request relief from that standard through the PUD process. So that'll be up for discussion tonight. And then where I got my wires crossed here is the frontage landscaping, where again they've responded to that in the response memo, and they would like to postpone putting the frontage trees out in front until they get to the second part of their proposal and their process.
Thank you. Is there anybody here from the public that would like to speak? Please come up, sign in. Sign in with your address.
Hi, my name's Greg Komorowski. I live on Brumar Street, which back my yard abuts to their property. And from what I heard, which I could barely hear, all these provisions they're wanting don't meet up to the standards. Seems like there's not enough property there for what they want to put up. That's my number one question. Number two, as far as the barrier, the fence they're talking about. Now they're talking about going 4 feet from the fence. Now, they didn't say what size fence. The last meeting we talked and we came to an agreement that if they were to put a 10-foot barrier, which I think they only want to put 6, a 10-foot barrier would keep people from encroaching into everybody's yard, which was the main problem at the last meeting. And so we talked in the back after the meeting, and they said there's no problem. So I don't know what they're proposing on that. And another thing was the drainage. The last time they worked on that field, they put a ball field in, and all of our yards are getting flooded out. So they had to put a drain back there. Now, are they going to do that this time also? That's the second question. And we talked about an easement. Now, there's supposed to be an easement, but they're talking 4 feet. Well, the 4 feet will probably fly if they put that 10-foot barrier, because that 10-foot barrier will keep people from coming over. A 6-foot won't. And that's a big problem. And it's probably a big problem for them also. But like I say, that's about all I got to say. But it seems like for what they're trying to do, they don't have enough property. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name's Matt Nicase. I just moved on to Brumar Street about 2 weeks ago, and I got this letter in the mail about this meeting, so I decided to come in. I don't know how many people have ever been next to a school that's proposing these kinds of stadium lights, but it's very bright, and the light penetrates very far away from it. The noise that you're going to get from activities going after dark going to be a lot different than what it is on our street now. Me and my wife spent over a year looking for a house, and as soon as I got this, I saw this letter about this development project. I understand people want to do things for the kids, but I've just spent an enormous amount of money to buy a house in a quiet, sleepy little neighborhood that we spent a year looking for, and I think this is just a horrible idea. You're going to affect people's property values. You're going to affect traffic. The light pollution is going to be ridiculous from this project. It don't matter how much you say you're going to contain it. If you put a light up 60 foot in the air, that's going to be an outrageous amount of light penetrating people's home. This poor gentleman over here, I can't even imagine being in his situation, the amount of noise and light he's going to have to deal with every day. Trying to resell his property, I can't imagine how he's going to get away with doing it. One of our things when we were looking to buy a house was staying away from this kind of development, and we thought we had. So it's very disappointing that we see this as soon as we buy the house. I don't know any other thing I can do to prove my case on this or plead my case, but it sounds like they're asking a ton of waivers, and it's very easy for you guys just to say no. None of this stuff should fly next to that beautiful, quiet, sleepy little neighborhood. It's not right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak? If not, I'll bring it back to the commission. Mr. Jaworski?
First off, we had some issues getting some of this paperwork, so it was quite extensive, and I think, number one, I'd like a little bit more time to review this, because on the surface, it seemed like the first meeting, the school was really working to be fit within the neighborhood. And I'm just seeing a lot of these things and these requests now that they're not really fitting of that space. So.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Klonowski?
Nothing right now, thank you.
Mr. Alexi?
Well, I agree with Ralph with just about everything he said. I don't think, like the neighbors were talking about the fence, changing from 6 to 10, from 10 to 6. I don't think that's a good idea. Trees, I don't know why they want to wait to plant the trees on the second half. But it seems like we've already been through all this, and we talked about most of this stuff, and we already approved stuff. And now it's coming back to our board to change. I think they're trying to get as much as they can out of that little piece of property there. Maybe they need to buy the lot next door. That's my opinion. That's all I got.
Thanks. Mr. LaBelle?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's one thing that we need to point out. This is just the application phase this evening. We're not actually going to vote, if I'm correct, we're not going to actually vote on anything tonight or make a recommendation to the main board this evening. So this is just a fact gathering, giving them an opportunity to go back to the drawing board if necessary and make some changes. With that, that's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Demink?
I think there's gonna have to be some, definitely some changes. I mean, I can understand you want an athletic field by a high school. I mean, it's a great idea, but you're cramming something into a area that backs up to a neighborhood. So I guess I'll leave that up to the rest of the board members and decide at a later date where we're at.
Mr. Renault?
Yeah, I have a couple items. Again, I can say I agree with most of what the board is saying. I also can understand wanting to put the athletic facility there, but I gotta tell you, asking for a 4-foot barrier between the lot lines and where we're supposed to be here from that one softball field, that's just, I can't even imagine anyone would be willing to think it's a good idea. So between that, I'd like to hear, I know you're asking for some waivers and whatnot, but what thought has been given to, it seems to me that, yeah, we're trying to cram way too much in here, and not hitting that 50-foot setback would be a real big issue. So that's all I have to say about it.
Thank you. Mr. Carr?
Yeah, just to try to, because again, we're not voting tonight, to just try to provide some feedback from my perspective. And similar to what everybody else said, I guess, obviously there's several issues with the plan. Again, first, I would say I agree with the fence, right? I mean, 6 foot isn't gonna stop anyone from when the ball flies over, just jumping a fence and going to get it, right? So I do think that that barrier needs to be better defined. Even if we do consider the fact that we're gonna waive the 50-foot requirement, the 50-foot requirement's there for a reason, because, I mean, just because of the light, the personnel, the noise, right? It creates that buffer, right? It gives you a lot of opportunity to put landscaping there, decorative fence, things like that will be more aesthetically pleasing, but also help with the whole, lighting and noise, and the fact that there's gonna be, kids and people right there, right? So it creates that buffer, so that if a ball does go farther than it should, it creates that. So I definitely think that you really do need to really take a look at that, a hard look. And if you still want us to consider, decreasing that 50-foot buffer to whatever that is, then I definitely think you need to look at a better fence than a vinyl fence. I understand vinyl fences are much more economical, but at the end of the day, I mean, if we're going to be lenient on other requirements, then sometimes you gotta spend a little bit more to again, compromise. So you're gonna need to definitely look at that and the height. I do disagree that 6 foot is not high enough. The noise, I know that was mentioned, that was one of my, I'm just going through all my comments, whether they're mentioned or not. Noise will be an issue. That's just the way it is. I understand you're expecting small crowds, it's a small school, but, again, it's still an issue anytime you deal with the ball field and cheering and things of that nature. So I think, that has to be, addressed in your future submission, just how you're planning to mitigate noise, whether that's restricting playtime, we're not gonna do anything past 8 o'clock at night, or whatever that is. That's something that you might wanna consider, how best to respond to that. I also do agree with the light. I know with the, new lighting and the directional lighting that there is out there, you can isolate the light to minimize anything that's going beyond the property line. But the reality situation is that at 60 to 80-foot lights, you're going to see the ambient light. It might not shine into the house, but you're going to see ambient light. So you're going to want to address that to some extent. Another thing too is I read your letter in regards to how you were fitting into the community, the benefit to the community, but what I thought was kind of odd was the fact that everything's locked up when you're not actively using it. So I didn't quite know how the community is going to benefit from anything that, unless you're an actual participant of that school, because they can't really go on there because you got locked gates, you know, around the entire thing. So I thought that might be something you need to revise in your letter to how it's benefiting the community, because typically how I interpret a community benefit is, you know, if a couple boys want to go and kick the soccer ball on the field, they have that opportunity. Here, they would have to climb a fence to be able to do that. So I thought that's something that you might want to take a look at. And then the last thing is the trees. So as an architect, I love trees. And so I love landscaping, and between the zoning board and the planning board that I've been on now for the last 6, almost 7 years, you know, a lot of people want to push, you know, screenings later down to future phases, and the reality situation is that I just don't think that's right, because nobody knows the future. We don't know, you know, if you're ever going to do the future phases, right? So to me, I get the parking lot thing, because again, snow management, what you wrote in your letter did make sense. I mean, big public schools, you know, they like their parking lots big and open, so you can push everything to the side. But when it comes to the street screening and the aesthetics from the front, I see no reason why you cannot put street trees along the entire front to enhance the aesthetics of your building. That is a simple thing that can be done now. You're not going to be able to encroach on your boulevard regardless of whatever you do. The boulevard's the boulevard, and you can definitely put trees there to enhance the aesthetics of your building. That's everything I have.
Thank you. Mr. Leonard?
There's been a lot of comments made tonight, and at this time, I don't have anything new to add to it, so
Thank
I'm
you.
good, thanks.
Everything has been said tonight. Mr. Alexi made a good point, you know, to look into buying that property on the opposite side of the school and putting a field there. And I do think it's too close to the residents on the other side of there. So, and if you had more screening, if you could put up a screen to keep the balls off their property, that would probably be more favorable too. But that's how I feel. Anybody else have anything? Would you like to?
Yeah, I will, as I indicated, I'm not an engineer and I'm not an architect, so I will do my best to answer some of these more technical questions. And perhaps Mr. Baker, as the athletic director, could chime in a little bit more on what we're looking at in terms of scheduling and just a little more realistic probability of how many events and what we're looking for there. First, I apologize. Komorowski? Mr. Komorowski. Yes, we would absolutely love to have more property, but the 14 acres that the school has is unfortunately kind of what they have to work with at this point. The fence height, as you know, right now it's a 4-foot chain link fence. We actually have no objection to going taller with that. And the reason we elected or proposed the vinyl was because we thought that it was more aesthetically pleasing for the residents that had a look at that, as opposed to a wooden fence that the condition, the repair obviously deteriorate faster than the manufactured vinyl fencing. If the planning, I know the township's ordinance limits the height of the fences to 6 feet, which is why that's what was proposed. If we can ask for a 10-foot fence and the commission is comfortable with the 10-foot fence, I don't think that that's going to be an issue for the applicant in this situation. Again, they are trying to maintain a relationship with their neighbors, just like any one of us would be doing with our neighbors at home. The drainage on site, I do want to address that as well. The Austin has committed to a significant on-site detention, which should address, and actually when they were calculating the loads and flows, it does appear that the properties to the north are actually draining to the south and draining to that field. So they've accounted for that in their calculations and determination of the size of this facility. So that, hopefully that issue would be resolved, that any water and standing water in your backyards, the detention structure that they are proposing, and again, this is where my engineer would be a lot more helpful in explaining this, but the detention structure that they're proposing is significantly larger than what's there now, and that the field will pull and drain so that the water won't be going to the north, it'll be going to the on-site detention. The lighting, that's probably the biggest thing. Now, Austin currently, they have a soccer team, is that the only sports team they have? And they don't have any teams that play in the evening, but if they're spending this kind of money on a facility, they would like to have the infrastructure there, should they ever implement football or sports in the evening. And the product that they have decided to go with or are proposing to go with is a company called Musco Lighting. And it's not, we're not talking the floodlights that are over at the Township Park on top of the 60-foot tall telephone poles that are over there, the metal or mercury halide lights that light up everything. These are LED chip lights. They are directional lighting, and Musco guarantees what's on the photometric plan that's been submitted, and I understand that the residents don't have that, but what they're proposing is essentially at the property line, 0.3 foot candles. That's like, oh, now it doesn't work. That's like the flashlight on this pencil, or this pen, in terms of directional lighting. And that's at a height of 3 foot off the ground, which is the industry standard for sporting fields. What I believe the township is 0 at the ground, so it might actually be less than the 0.3. And then, as Ms. Osborne pointed out, that 0.3 quickly drops off to 0, less than 10 feet onto those parcels to the north. So the light spillover, and I agree, the ambient light, having the taller poles, which I will address in a minute, that's something that's kind of the nature of the facility. The good news on that is that you're probably looking at maybe a half dozen to a dozen times a year that those lights would actually be on at night. And it's not like they're going to be a parking lot where they're on every single night. Addressing the height of the poles, that was one of the issues last year when we came for the pre-application phase. The big concern was the height of the poles, as well as potential for pole failure and that light spillover. So what Austin had done is they actually went back to Musco and had Musco redesign this. They were able to decrease the height of the poles. So originally they were proposing 80-foot poles all along that north elevation. They were able to decrease the height of those poles to 60 feet, but it did require the addition of one additional pole to be able to adequately light the field. So that did decrease the overall height, which I believe eliminates the possibility of any pole failure striking any one of the residential properties. And again, these poles are rated to exceed hurricane standards, so the likelihood of a pole failure is pretty minimal. Not impossible, because nothing's impossible, but fairly confident that we're not going to see these poles fall in our lifetime. So again, that reduction in height is the primary reason for the additional light pole that you've seen from last summer when we originally came before you with these. So this isn't a situation where Austin is trying to get more from the township. I mean, and really our plan, with the exception of the light poles, the plans have not changed from what was presented last summer. The question about the trees, ideally, this is the first step. This is the first phase for Austin, getting the athletic fields. The hope is that it will draw in more students. Currently, there's 110, how many? 115 students currently in the high school. So the thought is if they're able to build this facility, this athletic facility, that they will be able to attract more students and continue to grow this high school, as I indicated, to what it was prior to it closing down. So the trees, the second phase that they talk about is adding a gymnasium and improvements to the physical building itself. And that's where, and it's primarily addressing the parking lot, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to rip up the parking lot, plant a bunch of trees in it if, in 5 years, we're going to be ripping all those trees down and putting a building in that position. So that's why they had asked, if possible, to escrow those trees or put them in at a later development time, just not require all the ones that the township would require in the parking lot. I don't believe there's any issue with putting the trees along 23 Mile Road. I don't think that's a problem. There's no anticipation that they would be changing that lot circulation up front, which would disrupt those plantings. So I don't think that's an issue. And again, Mr. Baker can confirm that. Yeah, street trees. The gate, Commissioner Carr had mentioned the locking of the gate, and unfortunately, it's not a public school, and they can't leave it open to the public because it is a private school. Their liability insurance carrier won't allow them to do that. But what the anticipated public benefit was working with the Township Parks and Recs Department to allow the township to utilize those fields for their programming, to host camps, to have, while we would love to, have that gate opened again, the schools just, it's liability-wise, they can't do that. And that is something that we did discuss with the residents, because I believe one of the neighbors, he's not here this evening, but one of the neighbors there had indicated that a lot of kids would go out, fly their kites on the weekends, and and if that's something that maybe the Township Parks and Rec Department could pick up and run with, and Austin be more than happy to be supportive in that regard as well. So I think I touched on most of these questions. Jim, did you want to address the frequency?
So to talk a little bit and to support the statement about the trees, there are existing trees along the frontage on 23 Mile Road, so none of those would be interrupted with this project. And along the western side, where there's currently the chain link fence, in the plans they proposed that would be the new main entrance for the athletic facility. So there was some upgrades and some trees that would be added there. I think most of them that were in the discussion was in the parking lot islands. That was the requirement that we were asking for the relief from. And again, the second part of this plan, and I know that prior to my time at Austin, they had actually come to the Planning Commission, I believe, and talked about a gym project as phase one, and have kind of reversed that since then, but adding on to that gym that's currently there. It is an elementary school gym, no locker rooms, no bleachers, and so that would be phase two of this project. If it eases the concern of the residents, we talk about boosting enrollment, adding students. I think it's important to note that we're never going to be to the level of a L'Anse Creuse High School or even a De La Salle or some, L'Anse Creuse or Lutheran North. We're just not going to be there. In our master plan, we look at, somewhere between 150 to 250 students max would be where we would be at. So we're not going to be drawing gigantic crowds with raucous crowds and late nights and things of that nature. As mentioned, pretty small in terms of sports offerings right now. We do have a soccer team. We offer a variety of other sports, but they wouldn't be using these fields. We are going to start a softball team this spring. But again, the evening events for the field with the lights would really be if we get to a point where we add that football team. And again, a football team would play 4, maybe 5 home games in a season. And so, the typical high school football game would start at 7 p.m. It would be over by 9 p.m. So we kind of addressed that a little bit, I know, in the letter, the amount of times it was used. So this wouldn't be a 24/7, it wouldn't be all year, it would be fall sports season, and then potentially spring sports season if you wanted to have a couple of evening games under the lights for some of like the girls soccer team that plays in the spring or things of that nature. So I think that was it. What's it?
I forgot to address the setback.
Oh, okay.
One of the primary reasons why we had to go so far to the north with these fields is because of the requirement for a fire access road that kind of shifts everything, unfortunately shifts it all to the north. If you wanted to give us a waiver on the fire road, we could probably move everything to the south and prevent, whoever's going to be hitting dingers to right field on the softball from maybe hitting the fence. It's the distance on these fields, and I don't, unfortunately, again, I don't have the engineer here, but Jim, do you remember what the recall what the?
It would probably take a pretty darn good softball player to hit a home run to right field there, from anywhere close to the fence. I don't have the distance.
Yeah, So I just wanted to address that. That was,
The screen was an option, the screen that goes up and down, obviously it's not something that we would want to install permanently, just for aesthetic reasons, but, I know a lot of schools have done it. De La Salle just completed a field project where they have walked right to a neighborhood and they put up some protective screens, so that during the games, there would be no concern of a ball flying out or going out over the property lines.
was there any additional questions?
This property is only for Austin? I mean, you wouldn't tend to rent it out to another school for a Saturday night game that?
Initially, there would be no plans to rent the facility out. We do work with a youth baseball team right now. And I think a lot of the residents, we heard a lot of their concerns last year, and a lot of their frustrations stemmed from those renters. And so it became evident to us that it was a little bit more of a headache than it was worth. And so they've toned down their use of the field. It's primarily for the younger kids to practice now. I don't believe they're playing nearly as many games as they were a year ago on that field. So there would be no initial plans
Okay,
to rent that facility out.
My grandson plays on the field,
yeah.
baseball.
Mr. Klinowski?
Yeah. I know the last submission you had pictures of the lighting, and it looked like there was very little light trespass, but pictures can be deceiving as well. Is there any facilities that we could look at that use this new lighting system that is in the state or close by, or that we could, you know, take a look at it?
That would be, again, that's probably a question for our engineer. I know that, I believe they are some other facilities, but locally, that could, and all I have are very small photos that they provided us, which don't really help at all. So, I can't address the ambient lighting, but I am confident that, again, based on their photometric plan, that there's not gonna be any illumination or direct illumination of these residential backyards, you know, but for maybe 2 or 3 feet.
Yeah,
above the
but
property.
I'd still like to have a visual.
yeah,
And if you could
absolutely.
pass that on to your engineer, and
Absolutely,
perhaps he
yeah.
could, you know, contact that company and, you know, give us some examples. I'd like to see that.
Yeah,
It looks
absolutely.
very promising.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other comments? With nothing? Anybody that didn't speak want to speak? Three-minute time limit. Sign in your name with your name.
My name is Warren Hood. I'm right next door to Greg, right behind the proposed Austin Academy athletic fields. First off, I want you to know I love kids, and I love sports and all of those things. My concern has always been, I don't think that it can be the way they say. I mean, you're only going to have 300 residents at a football game. I mean, I find it hard to believe. I went to a small school over in New Haven, which was a Class C school, and we had way more than 300 people at those football games. And so where are we going to go with all this parking, all right? We already have a water problem on the back side of our property, and by raising everything up, all that water is going to flow our way. Are they going to put underground culverts and all that in for us? Are they going to put additional sewer systems in there for all of us to tap? Or are we going to just get flooded out and live with it? See, those are the concerns we have. It's not that we're joy suckers and trying to keep kids from playing football or baseball or any of the sports, okay? Dave DeBuscher I loved watching him play basketball as a young man growing up. So I love sports, and I love that they're naming their gymnasium the DeBuscher facility and that. But those are all wonderful things. But I'm also a resident, all that water flowing in my property, and it's no place to go. How do we deal with it? That's a question that all of us have on that street. And so those are questions that I would like to see resolved before we see any building going on over there, because there are no sewers up and down that street. There are no sewers. There's one sewer hole at the back end of that property, and that is it. There's nothing else there. So if the water can't go in that one place, all that water backs up, and it does. Am I right, Greg? Every winter and every spring, that water backs up there. and now we have flooding and no place for the water to go. So I think all of those questions need to be resolved before we give our approval on it and say, go ahead. I would like to see those things all resolved. That's the only comments I have to make.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any commissioners? Well, this is actually an application phase. We're not going to vote on anything tonight. So they'll have to come back with their plan, with all the suggestions that we made. So there'll be another public hearing. Will there? Is there a public hearing? Yeah, there'll be another public hearing. You'll be
Mr.
notified.
Chairman, can I just clarify the record? I thought counsel for the applicant had indicated that they've already been through the pre-application phase, correct?
That is correct.
And, yeah, under the provisions of your zoning ordinance, there's only one public hearing.
Okay, because it does say pre-application phase.
This agenda indicates that this is the planned unit development application phase. There's no public hearing on the pre-application. You get one public hearing, and under your zoning ordinance, it indicates that once the preliminary conditions have been satisfied, the Planning Commission shall hold a public hearing and hear and consider documents relating to the proposal and the rezoning. Following the public hearing, the Commission shall, within a reasonable time, forward the report and recommendation to the Township Board. So if they've been through the pre-application phase already and are submitting their application to the Commission tonight, and this is the formal public hearing, you're at the end of the line. I mean, you don't have to make your decision tonight. The ordinance provides that you would make that decision within a reasonable time.
Okay.
You know, reasonable is a matter of degree, but certainly you could take several meetings before you made the decision. But if you close the public hearing tonight, that's all the public hearing you get.
Well, as you all know, we just got all of our information today.
Oh, you can easily, if you close it, you can do one of two things. You can close the public hearing and say, look, we're going to need 60 days to digest this information, and we'll decide it at this is what, September, October, maybe pick a meeting in October or November, and you'll make your decision. So that people that are here that have been given notice will know of that meeting. Or you could conceivably continue the public hearing to a date certain. And
We
give
have to
the
do a date specific?
Pardon?
We have to do a date specific?
You do, because you're not going to renotice it again, and the people that receive their notice of the meeting won't know of the next one. So the people that are here that have been given notice will know when the continued public hearing will proceed. Now, you can give notice again, which, may be
Right.
appropriate, but
Yes.
I do recall the application phase, and it was a public hearing, and the public seemed to be pretty much on board with everything that was presented. So today's standards, they're looking to completely change what was discussed at that public hearing. So how is the public notified of such changes?
well, they were presumably given notice of tonight's meeting.
Correct, okay, so.
So they
if
would be
we-
here tonight to listen to the applicant, to see the presentation that was made, to
Okay.
hear the comments, and then after those comments were made, members of the public that are interested in speaking had that opportunity.
Okay.
All I'm saying is that the way your zoning ordinance is set up is once you hold the formal public hearing on the application, which is what the agenda notice indicates, that this is the application phase, the Planning Commission shall, within a reasonable time, make a report and a recommendation to the Township Board. So you could postpone a decision to a future date, within reason, not, 8 months, but within reason. If you wanted to adjourn it a couple of meetings, that's fine. But there will not be any further public hearings unless you keep this hearing open.
Thanks for the clarity.
Well, I would make a motion to close the public hearing,
Should go 60 days out.
60 days. November 22nd. Closed.
I'm just addressing the one thing that was proposed to us just now, is that until things were resolved, did you understand that?
Paul, you can't let him talk that. He already had one time to talk. Paul, it's your.
I think we were at a disadvantage with the petitioners not having their support here
Right.
people with all the answers. So it was a little diluted, I think, for the residents to get the specific information. So I think it was pretty important that you were here in full force rather than short, you know.
So if we leave the public hearing open, Mr. Siebert, would we be able to continue this at another date?
If the commission decides to keep the public hearing open, it will be continued at a date certain. So pick that date tonight,
Okay,
so that the people that are here that have already been given notice, the residents, will know that it will continue for another date. And you may want to talk to your planning department. To be fair to the people, there may be people that knew what was on the table and might have been satisfied, but they may come back and they may make some proposals at the next continued public hearing that are different. And it's never harmful to give too much notice to people to come and speak. So, but you definitely are going to continue it to a date certain.
okay.
And that meeting, and that public hearing will be kept open. But when you close that public hearing, then it's time up. Then you've got to, within a reasonable time, make your
November
recommendation.
22nd?
Yeah.
Jennifer,
November
are we meeting
22.
that day? I mean,
I would
it being Thanksgiving week? Yeah.
Talk to Boss Square, see if we're having a meeting.
Go November the 8th.
That is the meeting before
Election.
Thanksgiving.
Or election.
We don't have a problem coming back with the others earlier,
Right.
if that's a possibility. Again, this has been, we submitted everything last summer, and then there were some delays in getting informal meetings with the planning department. And then we submitted all of this information again in June to get on an agenda, and there've been delays again. So that, understand that the concern and taking the caution with moving forward, but, we would like to keep this moving as quickly as possible.
How much time would we need to go back to the architect and make some additional changes to some of the comments we have? I guess maybe that could be the driving factor to what we consider. I mean, I think we were doing 60 days to be effective to do that, it's just so we can go back.
Well, again, I guess maybe if we could, we've heard some general concerns about the lights and the trees, and I think we've addressed them. I mean, nothing has changed. Again, the only thing that's changed from last summer's submission is the addition of, is a reworking of the on-site detention to adequately hold all that water from the north, and then the addition of that one additional light pole to address the concerns about the potential for pole failure striking one of the residential properties. The configuration of the field, the location of the field, the setback requirements, that's all the same that was presented last summer. And I stand corrected, the fence, we did propose to change the material of the fence, and again, we're not objecting to, if the township board is telling us they want a 10-foot tall fence, we're not objecting to putting in a 10-foot tall fence. So I guess if there's specific changes that the commission is looking for, happy to take those back to our team, but I haven't heard that.
Mr. Miller,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of comments from the board members on stuff that we need to digest, that they need to resubmit or, come back with their people. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make the motion for November 1st to bring it back and leave the public hearing open.
Leave the public hearing open?
And that's by, Jenny looked on the thing, and November 1st is planning commission meeting.
I would support that.
We have a motion by Mr. DeBank, supported
And there's
by
only
Mr.
one meeting in November.
Mr. Renault to postpone until November 1st.
And leave the public hearing open.
Leave the public hearing open.
Is that okay, Mr. Siebert?
Yep, that's fine. And then at the end of that public hearing,
We close it.
presumably you will close the public hearing. And then at that point, you'll have a reasonable opportunity after that time to make a report and recommendation to the full township board.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a support by Mr. Renault. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. November 1st, the meeting. Okay. Yeah, it's open. Yeah. Yeah. Public hearing is open.
This was all from June or the last thing, why do they need all the waivers? Isn't that waiver change things?
We postponed it till November the 1st, so you can come back. Yeah. Thank you. can leave if you want. Oops. Reviews, our secretary, Rick, will begin the items that we can do in a timely manner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item A is Sass Flats, 2022-05, site plan RM2. It's a 5.171 acre, north of 23 Mile Road, west side of Sass Road. The parcel ID is 15-09-15-300-048.
Can you please exit the room?
Okay, the applicant is here this evening to answer any questions or to offer any suggestions. If Kiffles Webster wants to review their report and then give the applicant a chance to respond.
No, you first.
Okay. All right, so the proposal is to construct 3 multiple family buildings that each have 12 units. And the dimensional standards have all been met. They're all compliant with what's required for the zoning district. Moving into page 3 of my review, discussing open space requirements. The plans show a path, benches, and pergola. So they have some recreational activity areas, and the equipment for that is all concentrated on the west recreation area. Further down on that page is a discussion of some specific landscape setbacks. The applicant has not provided the calculations to confirm distance between buildings, the square footage and percentage of pavement around the buildings. And so we will be able to approve those administratively, but I just wanted to note that we're still missing those. In terms of landscaping, on page 4, the number of trees that they've proposed is compliant. However, they've put them not in the front. Oh, sorry. In terms of the number of trees, they are compliant with the number of trees, but they have proposed that they not be placed in the front yard. Their lot is very narrow and long, so they don't have a whole lot of frontage as it is. But where they've proposed to place the trees in front of the buildings on the other side of the drives seems to be in compliant or meet the intent of the ordinance. Moving along to page 5, again, we're just missing calculations on the amount of brick face, and the commission should just discuss to make sure that the materials are compliant or what you're looking for the exterior surface of buildings. Let's see, I think that's about it. Oh, and in the parking lot, the interior parking lot landscaping, the ordinance requires that 8% of the interior trees be provided within the parking lot, and the trees are placed around the parking lot instead. So that will be up for discussion as to whether a variance is needed for that or not. And finally, bicycle parking facilities are missing. They would need 4 bike parking spots.
Motorcycles or bicycles?
For bicycles. Thank you for that clarification. That is the extent of the review.
I did have an opportunity to speak with the applicants prior to the meeting, and he did point out some of those calculations. So if you could clarify where those calculations are on the drawing, and it can be done administratively as well. If you feel that you already have done that, we can skip all of this and you can do it administratively.
Yeah. So when we got these revisions, they were sent out to our landscape engineer as well. to get them all revised. So the first one of concern, meaning the calculations, you'll see on page 1 of the site plan under, it's at the top, pretty much in the center, Article 3, Section F, calculations for A and B. Excuse me, yeah, A and B. The notes have been given there for that, so that was directly from the engineer in regards to those. Next in order, I'm just looking back on the summary here. Bicycle parking facilities were proposed. If you look on page 1 of the landscape plan, this was added. It's even more clear on page 2 of the landscape plan because it gives kind of a zoomed in focus of each building. You'll see on the southwest corner of the building, there's a bike rack location, and that's for each building. So there is bike parking outside for each building per se. In regards to the building material and the brick, those calculations are provided on page 1 of the architectural plans for all sides of the building. They all exceed 51%, which is the code or ordinance needed for brick facade, so that is at or above the ordinance. That was 3 of them. Let me find my notes for parking, excuse me, bike parking. A clerical error that was made by our landscape architect. He corrected the parking spaces from 92 to 90 to accurately reflect that. There are 90 spaces, 36 units, 2.5 spaces per unit is 90 spots. So we are in line with that. In regards to the 80% of required trees within the parking lot, what I'll have to say to that is just really how narrow this lot is. It makes more sense to have them around the building than island trees in the center of a parking lot. So that's obviously something we need to discuss this evening, but to have 80% of all the trees, of the interior trees within a parking area, whether it's a main drive parking lot, seems a bit difficult in this for how narrow this site is. But you'll see, I mean, we well exceed, according to the landscape plan, we well exceed the ordinance for screening, and even around the buildings, it's doctored up really, really nice. I believe that was the last one out of the 5 that we needed. Brick veneer we discussed. I believe that was all 5. Any other questions or?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that everything that's been discussed this evening, again, most of it can be cleaned up administratively, pointing out where things are at in the drawings, things of that nature. One item that I would like to discuss is, yes, you did demonstrate the 51% brick, but above the brick you've got vinyl siding. And as we had talked prior to the meeting, would you consider a we have been allowing more hardy board in the township. Would you consider going with something more sustainable than a vinyl siding, such as a hardy board product for the upper level of the homes, in lieu of the vinyl siding?
Yeah. So it is something that we would certainly consider if that's a concession we need to make to work with the township on that. What I will say though is, you know, it's not so much a cost thing; it's a maintenance thing over time. You know, the vinyl is much easier to maintain. But with that said, according to page 2, our front setback on this property is 281 feet to the first building. So it's a very far setback from the road. I mean, unless you're up close, you're not going to tell hardy board or siding, you know, whatever it may be, unless you're on the north side, you know, the Seabridge condos. But it is something we are open to if that's a concession that needs to be made.
But it's not only aesthetically, it's durability as well.
Yeah.
And that's what we're concerned about is 20 years from now.
Certainly.
10 years from now.
Yep. Certainly, yeah.
So
we're definitely-
I would think that if in fact you're willing to go with a hardy board, I think that would be favorable.
It's certainly something that we're open to, absolutely, and willing to do.
Thank you. Anybody else have any comments? Nope. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend the approval, or make the approval for the SAS Flats 2022-05 with the addition of the hardy board on the upper level of the buildings. And in my motion, I feel that because of the configuration of this piece of property, some of the items that we talked about, the location of trees, things of that nature, because it's such a narrow piece of property, I think that they've done a good job of locating the landscaping, even though it is it's different than what the township ordinance requires. It does achieve what I believe the township is looking for. With that, I make a motion to approve.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. LaBelle, supported by Mr. Alexi. All in favor?
Absolutely. And just for clarification. Thank you. And just to clarify, the main change on that in regards to the building plans is the hardy board. You want that obviously on the building plans. Everything else has been accounted for of the five. Okay. Okay. Awesome.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Stephanie Osborne is filling in for Matt, who got a new job, so she'll be our assistant all the time now. Right. And Jill Baum is filling in for Rod, who's off tonight. And Jenny's filling in for, you know who, Jonathan. Nobody right now. We gotta have more meetings. Yeah, so welcome them after the meeting. Approval of the minutes of prior meetings. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of August 16th, 2022. We have a motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Renault. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Communications, there's none. New business, none. Old business, none. Planner?
I am happy to be here. Thank you for the warm welcome. I have just two pieces of news for you. I have a newsletter on the future of transportation. This is a two-part series that we are sending out on electric vehicles. So this first part is about things or the reasons you might want to consider electric vehicle charging infrastructure in your community, and just things to think about as you're going about your work planning, and why that's important. The other thing I just want to note is that much of our planning team will be in Mackinac Island in October for the Michigan Association of Planners Conference, and they'll be providing a couple of great sessions. So if you're able to make it, they would love to see you there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Jill, did you have anything?
I was going to say the things that Stephanie said, so thank you. Is anyone going up to the MAP conference? Are you? Wonderful.
Most of us
Oh,
are.
good. Oh, good. All right. Well, I'm doing a session on Wednesday afternoon. It's the ethics session. There'll probably be more professional planners at that one, because it is, we get credit for ethics and law are our two credit, special credits that we need in addition to our continuing education credits for our AICP. But then on Thursday, we also have a couple of other staff that are doing a presentation on future-proofing your planning and zoning department. So I think it'll be fun. And even more fun is we will be having a reception at the Pink Pony at 6. Yes. So 6 to 8. So please come by. Rod will be there. Thursday at 6 o'clock. We don't care about our sessions at all, but we will have drinks for you at the reception and snacks. Yeah. So thank you. It's been nice seeing. If I could just make one editorial comment. To the applicant's comment about the hardy plank and it being set back 280 whatever feet from the road, from Sass Road, I think it's also fair to point out it's not just for people who are going to pass by this project. It's for the people who are going to live there too.
Right.
So just a little sidebar comment.
Thank you.
But well done.
Audience participation, I see none. Comments from individual commissioners, Mr. Jaworski, Mr. Klanowski, Mr. Alexi, Mr. LaBelle.
Looking for volunteers for pre-planning.
I don't think Mark and I are going to volunteer.
They were late.
When's the next meeting, the 4th?
Yeah.
October 4th?
I'm giving you that. Okay, I'm raising my hand.
I'll be in Puerto Rico that week anyways. I will have to be excused, I have to be in Puerto Rico.
October 4th?
Puerto Rico's gone.
Yeah, that's right. The fourth. For work. I have a guy that's now.
Carl, do you have anything to say?
No, you got me in for pre-planning.
All right.
No, I'm good.
Brian, you have any?
No, I'm good.
Mark?
Which Brian? No, my only comment is just again, just reiterate I mean, I know it's history because it's already done for the day, but it was really, really frustrating getting these things today.
I know.
Like for something like yourself that works, I mean, like it was very difficult, so I think in the future, what I don't understand is, I just don't understand the checks and balances within the planning department to make sure these documents get out. I mean, there's gotta be something, you can't just set the go button and, just assume people got it, because we haven't had a meeting in a long time, there's been no, I mean, that was, so something's gotta be done from
Yeah.
a process standpoint.
There's a problem with the server going on, Brian, that's what they tell me. We've been changing a bunch of computer stuff around.
We're getting new email servers tonight.
Okay.
We're getting new email servers tonight between 8 and 10. But we're shut down from our emails.
How did they end up showing the?
Carl, turn your mic on.
Computers that we couldn't get them on the iPad?
Yeah.
Because whatever happened from yesterday or whatever to this morning, we all got it this morning.
I'm not really sure, but I know Sarah sent these out, I believe a week or two ago, and she had no idea that you guys didn't get them. So,
Is there any reason we couldn't get them sent to our personal and?
Well, they tried sending the personal last night, and Sarah was still sending them from the Chesterfield Township account, and that was where the issue was starting, so it's not getting sent out from there. So hopefully the new server should.
So maybe Sarah, maybe to solve it, Sarah could do do the receipt, right? So she gets an email receipt when people open it, so that if she sees that nobody opens them, maybe she, that's a trigger to her to be like, oh wait, let's double check, make sure. That's what I'm saying, is something in the process that.
Or at a minimum, check with Paul,
Well,
make sure he has it, 'cause he.
You know, just,
I don't look at my iPad every day. I look at my other computer every single day.
I did reach out to Sarah last Friday morning. She was out of the office for the weekend, so
yes,
I
she was on
called
vacation.
Jonathan on Monday, and that's when we found out that everybody didn't get it, so he sent them to everybody, and nobody got them except you, right?
I got it, yesterday morning, the 10th one.
So then I called him last night after work at 5, and he told me he would get it out first thing this morning, so that's why it's a good to table it anyways.
I can make the suggestion that they're sent to both the township email and personal emails.
I'll
Yeah.
see it when that-
I mean, once she makes the group,
Just
it's
to
not
the-
a,
Just to the problem's been resolved at least.
well, hopefully tonight the problem
Well, I
is
wouldn't mind
resolved
mine
by
always
tomorrow
on
morning.
my personal and the iPad.
I understand.
It can be a personal one, if
Mhm.
somebody doesn't want it to go to both, they can opt out, but I would rather have both.
Yep, I will definitely make that suggestion in the morning.
Okay, proposals for next agenda, anybody got anything? Nope. Motion to adjourn?
What, do we have anything on the agenda for the next meeting, out of care? So we do, the 4th.
What do we have?
Dynamic plastic
Turn your mic on.
sorry.
She's
There are
very
two
strict about that.
there are two site plan reviews. I know one is dynamic plastic. They're doing an addition, and I cannot remember the other one.
Okay, well,
It might be the car wash by then
oh, up on, by Home Depot.
on Gratiot.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'll make a motion to adjourn at 8:08. Motion by Mr. Miller, supported by Mr. Renault. All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Yeah, you see,